Hello and welcome to the Happiness Jungle TV show. I am your guest host, CamiBaker.com. And as always, I have fabulous guests. And today I have a rock star guest, a good friend of mine, Aric Morrison. We met a few years ago, and Aric has done all kinds of fun stuff in the last few years. I'm wanting to share his story and his adventures with our viewers. So Aric, welcome to the show.
Thanks, great to be here. It's kind of funny. I woke up this morning and looked at my calendar. And I said, okay, today's the day I finally get to catch up with Cami and talk about all this good stuff. So this has been one of those dates on the calendar that I circled a while ago. So glad to be here.
Nice.
Thanks for having me. We definitely have a lot to catch up on. It's been a little while.
Nice. So where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with deep water mentor coaching. So I have my own mentor coaching business. As you know, my whole platform essentially is built around helping people overcome adversity. My background has been dealing with families that have faced very difficult situations, having a critically ill child myself, and going through a pretty long, painful journey. I learned a lot. And in that process, one of my key takeaways was there really wasn't anybody for me to go to. When I was sitting alone in my child's hotel room, you don't wake up in the morning and say, okay, my child is going to be diagnosed with cancer. So there really was nothing for me in terms of being able to sit down with somebody and talk to somebody at night and get a little bit of guidance or advice or even just a vent.
Well, you know what? Let's actually take a big step back because people need to know a little bit of your story. Sure. So take us back to how this whole thing started, wherever you want to start.
Yeah, so back in 2006, my child was born as a micropreemie. He was very, very small, had a lot of medical concerns. He was in the hospital for a significant amount of time. And he made it through the initial birth, and after his second birthday, we literally took a step back, his older brother and his mother, and we celebrated how far we had actually come over 2 years. This little child was born so small, and here he is celebrating a second birthday. And I had gone to a baseball game and had attended a concert that I'd always wanted to go to.
So up until that point, he was normal in your...
Yeah, relatively speaking. Now, when he was born, he was 20 ounces. So when you think about the size of a water bottle, for instance, that's what he weighed at the time.
Yeah.
Micropreemie. So there certainly is a myriad of problems when you're born that small.
Yeah.
So the first 2 years, as I indicated, was it was a real battle, but we made it through. So relatively speaking, yes, at the end of the 2 years, here's our little wondrous boy that had lived in the hospital for a period of time, and here we are lighting candles on a cake. Mm. And I had gone to a Red Sox game and a concert, as I mentioned, and this was a Monday night, and I sat there with my friend at Fenway Park, and I said, it's so nice, finally, after 2 years, to be able to sit back, look at how far we've come as a family, and start to get back to normal and enjoy where we are in life. Mm. And quite literally 2 days later, our next phase with my child began, and he became very, very sick, and his stomach became distended like a basketball. And 2 days after that, he was diagnosed with what's called hepatoblastoma, which is a cancer that originates in the liver. So if you can imagine a 2-year-old little boy with what I jokingly say had kind of spindly arms and legs, chicken legs, if you will, with a basketball sized stomach. It was heartbreaking. And we didn't have any idea, obviously, what the cause of it was. So we were thrust into this whole new situation to deal with cancer, a cancer diagnosis. And with that came our next journey, which lasted for, well, it literally is ongoing today. But we've had some organ transplants and a lot of surgeries, and just gone through just a myriad of medical crises, if you will, one after the other. But learned a lot. So that is really kind of when I mentioned there wasn't anybody to speak of for me. I would go to the restaurant and down in the lobby, and I'd see like-minded people all sitting there, and everybody had a story. Everybody was facing some form of adversity, and everybody wanted to share. Everybody wanted to talk about it, but nobody really knew what to say because everybody's story was different and unique. And it really got me thinking as I reflected back a few years ago. I said, first of all, I want to tell my story and I want to be able to give back and help people. So how do I make that come to fruition a little bit better? So I created this business called Deepwater Mentor Coaching. And the original focus was to help people in similar situations. So families that are dealing with critically ill children, or any family member that's critically ill, or dealing with loss, how do you help them navigate some of those changes that come when you're thrust into that circumstance? So I was really pleased to launch the business that way. So I partnered up with a bunch of doctors and some hospitals. And very slowly over time, I've built a client business, and I have, people essentially, mostly over in the Northeast. I have a few around the country, but I talk to people on Skype. We do phone mentoring, coaching sessions. I do group coaching sessions. So
you do speaking engagements?
I do speaking engagements, and everything really just falls back around my story, but also about adversity and overcoming adversity and facing adversity, and what are some of the emotions that go with that. It certainly is, it's overwhelming. But I wanted to be able to take my story to stage and speak to people, in addition to this mentor coaching business, share my story, but also be able to kind of help inspire some people too. And I know you and I spoke a little while ago, and one of your comments to me, which resonated, was, Aric, I love being on stage and I love making a difference for people. And it really is true, because when you're speaking to an audience and you know that you're sharing your story and people are nodding their head in approval and listening to what you have to say, it's very valuable and it's very powerful. And to me, that's the other motivating factor from all this. So,
well, and especially with what you're talking about is so heavy. It's just, it can be a real downer, but and that's why you need people around you that can support you and raise you up and give you a reason to keep moving forward.
And sometimes that's really, from a coaching perspective, sometimes that's really what people are looking for. So when you're an adversity coach, and obviously my business is very specialized, right? When you're an adversity coach, people by definition are coming to me because they're dealing with something fairly heavy, right? Now, I do not, in adversity coaching, I do not provide solutions to people. This is a co-creative relationship. So we talk about whatever the issue is, whatever the problem is, or whatever's on somebody's mind, and then we work together to get them to formulate those solutions over a 50-minute session. So as those sessions go along, they evolve and they change. So some of those really are nothing more than, okay, somebody is having a really, really bad day this week. Let's kind of talk through that. And that's where the beauty for me, being somebody that's lived through so much adversity, I can also put the mentor hat on and not be so much of an adversity coach, but I can be a mentor to them and talk a little bit more about, here's how I handled this, here's how I dealt with this, here's how I would recommend. So it's not so much co-creative, it's more of, here's a mentor relationship, let me help you out for this week. So it's kind of unique and different, if you will.
I'm kind of curious, with that being such a heavy topic and talking to people on a daily basis that need that kind of support, what do you do to keep yourself up and positive and happy?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, because recently I actually was having a pretty difficult day. And everybody has bad days, and it's just a matter of scale and scope of what that actually means for people. And for me, I like to go to, there's a spot in New Hampshire that I go to, and I have an affinity for this one spot, and it sounds a little bit silly, but it is literally my place to go just to kind of clear my head, clear my mind. And I know when I get there, whether I'm there for an hour or 4 hours, that's my time. And sometimes I sit in my vehicle and I listen to the right music that complements my mood. Other times I get out and I sit on a bench and I watch the water go by. But it's a place that I know psychologically, when I go there, that's Aric's spot to heal. And everybody, and I actually talk about this in my book, everybody needs to have that type of a place to go to. And it doesn't have to be a place, but it's a mindset that you have to get to that says, I'm not having a good day today. And if you're in the office, you probably should just get out of the office and regroup and figure out what it is that's going to enable you to get to a better place. So,
as you were mentioning that, I was imagining, well, that must be a part of your book then, because that would be something really important. So tell us a little bit about your books.
yes, so it's funny because over the last, 5 years, I would say, I lost a lot of contacts with a lot of business people. And when I brought those relationships back over time with some people, I'd see folks that I hadn't seen in a long time. We'd have dinner, cocktails, or whatever. And the two questions that were always asked of me were, how are you two boys? What's going on with the book? Always, always, always. Now, the story that I'm telling you is in my book entitled Stealing Home. And that was a story that I started writing back by my son's hospital bed when the very first day he was diagnosed. It was May 23rd, 2008. Right? You never forget your diagnosis day. And for me, it was an opportunity to sit and gather my thoughts and just think about where I was and just write everything down in my laptop. Didn't have any intention of writing a book or crafting any sort of a story. I just wanted to kind of do it for me. So when you actually talk about how do you kind of compartmentalize your emotions, back in the day, that's what I did. So it just worked out into almost a really cathartic situation for me to put things down. And I created a website at the time to share information with friends and family, and it was a closed website, so you only had to, the only way you could get in was if you had a password that we gave to you. So it was a very personal daily journal of what was going on in our life. And the naive side of me didn't realize that people share passwords and people have a lot of friends. And if they go online and read your story in the morning with a cup of coffee, if they're sitting with somebody, they may say, you got to see this story. This is something that I follow every day. So for us, the website grew and grew and grew and grew. So more and more people started to follow our story. And that entire process just made me stop and say, you know what? People are investing time in listening to this child in Boston struggling. Let me do a little bit of a better job to give back and tell our story someday, one day. So I took a lot of information from that website. And today the website has realized it's not even a live website per se, where I usually do 1 or 2 posts a year on there. And it's realized over 250,000 hits. So it's a website that really was created as a mechanism to get information out to people, and it turned around and became a mechanism of support for us. So people were putting entries in every day and talking about our journey and giving us lots of words of inspiration. So that website just got me thinking as well, there has to be more to why we're going through this journey. So it's connecting with people. How do I take it to the next level and really share a lot of the behind the scenes details that people were not aware of when we were going through that journey? And that's really what this book does. It's a very deep retelling of what we went through, but it also has a very positive, uplifting message to it too.
Well, you know, the creator of The Happiness Jungle, Lyn-Dee Eldridge, the show that we're sitting on, just survived breast cancer a couple of years ago, and she wrote a book about surviving breast cancer, and it's called Squeeze My Tatas.
Oh, okay.
You're only 1 mammogram away from knowing. And you know, it's very helpful. I mean, that's same kind of a thing, you know, the day that she was diagnosed, and she goes through, you know, what happened at 9 a.m. that day, because it was very recent for her, just 2 years ago.
Sure.
And there's so many people that find a lot of comfort in knowing, you know what, I'm not the only one, especially in your situation. You know, you have a critically ill child, you know you're going to be living with this for years, hopefully a lot of years. Yeah. And, you know, what do you do? What do you do?
Yeah, it's really been nice to give back. It's nice to see that book and that story finally come to fruition, and to have people come up and say, Aric, I love the book, love your story. Never realized you folks did this or went through this. And a lot of people never realized, because they picked up our story during the cancer segment. They didn't realize all of the backstory when he was born so premature and all the struggles that we went through. So by taking that story all the way back, it really kind of made the entire story a little bit more whole and complete, if you will. So I'm very, very pleased. It came out very well.
So now you've got a couple of books, you're helping all these folks, you got all these programs. How can people see you on stage? Like, where do you speak? Where the people who are watching and say, hey, I want to hear that guy speak. Tell us a little bit about what that looks like.
Well, social media is a really good place to go. If you go to Deepwater Mentor Coaching, there's a little bit of a speaking segment on there. I actually am in the process of launching a much more significant platform, which is bringing together the speaking and the books and the writing and the blogging. That's going to be launched in the next week or so. So most of all of that is all going to come into one platform. I do a lot of speaking with charities. In fact, this fall, one of my initiatives is to speak to a lot of charities and fundraisers and share my story and try to get awareness, particularly around the holidays, because adversity is adversity, as I kind of started this conversation. And at the holidays, a lot of people struggle. So what a nice way for me this year, it's my own, one of my personal objectives, but to do a little bit more speaking for charities this year and help out folks that might be struggling, raise awareness for some people's struggles, use my story hopefully to help raise some money and inspire. So, you know, a lot of it is charitable, a lot of charitable stuff right now, going online, website stuff. I'm actually doing an appearance at a trade show in a few weeks. So a lot of grassroots and you know, a lot of word of mouth.
You're doing a whole campaign around the country. You're going to hit every state.
Yes, that's the goal. So right now it's in the planning stages. So next year, I thought it would be really special. When I look at our journey back in 2008, it was a 63-day journey from start to finish. And when I say start to finish, start was the diagnosis day. Finish was the day that my son's life was saved via an organ transplant. So that window of 63 days has always been one of the lowest times of my life, obviously, but also one of the most uplifting, because the day that he received his transplant, he got a second lease on life. And in that process, there was another family involved that was the organ donor family. And I had always said with my wife, we will never forget this family. So every year, a week later after my son's transplant, we light a candle and we do a candlelight vigil, and we've done it through 50 states since 2008. And last year, because it was our 10-year, I don't want to say it's a milestone, but it's 10 years since that very difficult time, I wanted to do something very meaningful to give back to all of those people in all those states that I still have not met yet, that still follow our story. So I thought it would be really neat to travel to all 50 states next year over 63 days and light a candle in every one of those states and partner up with local charities, do a speaking engagement at as many as I possibly can, hopefully one per state, give back to all 50 states, have the people at those events light a candle, celebrate life, but also remember that family, because it's just so important for me to make sure. I've never met them, but I want to be able to one day, if I'm fortunate to meet them, let them know that their story lives on with us.
Well, let's do a shout out. Let's let all of our viewers know that you are going to need some assistance with that. So when you are setting up your tour, are you looking for certain venues, certain groups to reach out to? You want to partner with the Marriott to put you up in hotels while you're on the road? Like, what are you looking for?
Well, that's a detail that I still need to work through. So one of the concerns that I have is I have a tour route already on paper right now. One thing I do not want to do is I don't want to confirm that tour route, because then if somebody is in, let's say, Sandusky, Ohio, and my tour route is going through a different part of that state, it's going to change the whole domino effect for everybody else if I lose a day or a half a day in here. So I want to keep it fairly loose in that if somebody is having a charitable fundraiser at, say, a restaurant, and they have a family member that plays in a band and they want to make that let's have this be a special night to raise awareness for whatever this cause is. And oh, by the way, this Morrison guy is going to come over and say hello and sign some books and help raise some money. Let's build it around that. And somebody else may be doing something a little bit more significant. So maybe they're renting space, venue space, and they're really working on a significant planning phase for it. So I really want it to be all of the above, but have everyone be unique and special and different for whatever the culture is, whatever the climate is, whatever the cause is, and whoever the fundraisers are for it.
Not to take you off task, but you just mentioned a member of a band, and I seem to recall that one of the people who endorses your book has to do with a band.
Yeah, you know, and that's really something special, super special for me, because I laugh. I've been playing the drums since I was probably 2 years old. And I started on a little Muppets drum set, and I've always been inspired by music. And through some of my dark days, lyrical content and song has always really resonated with me. But one of my idols growing up was the drummer for Kiss, named Aric H. And I had always said, someday I want to meet him. And his reputation was just a really genuinely nice guy, did a lot for fans, very approachable. Everything I had heard said this is just a really nice role model for kids. And unfortunately, I never had the chance to. He passed away of cancer in the very early 90s. But I was able to meet his sister, who runs AricH.com, and she keeps his legacy alive. So she has since become a friend of mine. I meet with her typically once a month, and we share stories and share tears. And she knows my story about my son. We did a Make-A-Wish trip and took some pictures with one of her brother's shirts on, with a Make-A-Wish logo in the background, and kind of took his memory with us to Disney World.
Wow, like you're really good friends with her.
Yeah, it was really special. So
what's her name?
Her name is Loretta Caravello. And so she knows our story. And she was very gracious to endorse the book and write a really nice piece for the book. And she shared with me a picture that's included in the book of her brother behind a drum kit. So it's been really, really special and just super meaningful when you have an idol like that, to be able to bring it full circle around in a book that is also talking about difficult stuff, but also it's rewarding as well, because she's helping to keep her brother's memory alive, and it's my very simple way of doing it as well, but tying it into our story because he was just that important to me.
Nice. Well, share with our viewers in the last couple of minutes some things that they can look for in the book and in your coaching. Like, what are 2 or 3 tips you could give people who are going through adversity right now?
One of the biggest pieces of advice I would say to people is, you're not going to overcome adversity if your mind is not in the right place initially. And in that, there's that shock factor where you've just received some very, very bad news. You can't suppress those emotions associated with that. You have to accept, yes, I just received some very, very bad news. And if that means you need to go away and cry, that's okay. If you want to take a day off from work, that's okay. You're not going to face adversity unless you get your head, your mind into the right space first. From there, then you can start to formulate what is your plan going to be moving forward. So you have to get through that initial shock phase, if you will. And I actually have outlined 5 steps. And once you've gone through those 5 steps, then you can migrate over into more of an action phase. And that's the doing phase that says, okay, I've accepted, I'm facing something fairly difficult right now. What do I do about it? So you're over the emotional phase, now you've migrated over into the doing phase. So you formulate your action plan, you draft your action plan, and then you get ready to implement that action plan. But none of that can occur until your head is in the right frame of mind. So when you ask me that question, I think you really have to accept first of all. You have to be willing to accept something not great is going on right now. And then from there, however long it takes, if it's a week to grieve, that's okay. Don't stop and say, okay, I've got to
tough it out.
Yeah, I got to tough it out and I got to make this thing happen. Whatever it takes, if it's a week, fine, accept it. And then get your mind into the right phase, and then move on to the next steps associated with this.
That makes me want to ask, if you're in a situation where your head's in the right place, but there's another parent or another sibling that's not, how can you help that person?
Yeah, well, you really have to individualize every single person that's going through it. Now, Deepwater Mentor Coaching, I've done mentor coaching with families, and I've done one-on-one coaching with family members that are going through the exact same thing. And you have to individualize that circumstance for everybody. If you try to take a one-size-fits-all approach for 4 people at the same time, they're all going to be in different phases when it comes to dealing with adversity. And sometimes you're fortunate if the stars align and everybody is at that same phase, but more often than not, that's not where people are. So you really have to individualize everybody's story and everybody's journey.
You make me feel so glad that my coaching is always happy and moving forward, and let's build a business and let's market and make our brand, and because that's tough, man. Thank you for what you do.
Sure. Well, we talk about adversity, but that's the difficult side of it. But for every one of those stories, there's also the uplifting piece too. I have a client that's overcoming cancer. Her story has been remarkable, and to see that progression from start to finish, there's always the other side there as well. So, and that's where the rewarding piece is for me, to know that I'm making a difference for people, whether it's in the coaching, it's in the books, or it's on stage. It's just really nice to be able to say, let's help some people and let's make a difference and let's do something special for folks.
1000%. So, what's the last thing you want people to know?
Never give up. I have 3 phrases: never give up, never give in, and never settle. You gotta be able to deal with it. I have a hard time saying those 3 things because those are words that I lived by back in the day, and I carry that with me every single day. No matter how difficult the journey is, you can get through that. You have to. And I'm living proof. And I have a 13-year-old little boy that has gone to hell and back, and he's the living proof and the inspiration. So never give up.
And another boy.
And another boy
beautiful
who is
big brother.
He is my inspiration every day. His name is Aaron. Correct.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. It's great.
Yeah. So another wonderful episode of the Happiness Jungle, because it's still happy.
It's great. It's fantastic. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
Bye-bye, everybody.